समपात समस्त दुर्ग सहत्वारास्य परमेश्वर चित्तम निर्मंदा सिद्धित्वादो विघ्नेश्वर पूजां कर्ष्ये गणानां त्वा गणपतिगं अवामि कविं कवीनां सूत्रमं ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पदे आनुष्ठुन्ति श्रीदानम् अस्मिन् दर्शनमे महागणपतिं ध्यायामि महागणपतिम् अवामयामि। ओम महागणपति आसनं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपति अर्घ्यं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपति पाद्यं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपति आसमन्यं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपति औपचारिकस्नानं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपति स्नानानन्तरम् आसमन्यं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपति वस्त्रदातम् अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपति यज्ञोपवीतार्थम् अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः गन्धान् धारयामि समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः गन्धोपरीक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः गणनाथम् अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः चित्रा कुङ्कुमं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः पुष्पै पूजयामि। ओम सुमुगाय नमः। ओम एकदन्ताय नमः। ओम कपिलाय नमः। ओम गजगर्णकाय नमः। ओम लंबोदराय नमः। ओम विगडाय नमः। ओम विघ्नराजाय नमः। ओम विनायकाय नमः। ओम धूमकेतवे नमः। ओम गणाध्यक्षाय नमः। ओम बालचंद्राय नमः। ओम गजाननाय नमः। ओम वक्रतुंडाय नमः। ओम शूर्पकर्णाय नमः। ओम हेरंबाय नमः। ओम स्कंदपूर्जवाय नमः। ओम सिद्धविनायकरे नमः। ओम शंकरमोक्षविनायकरे नमः। ओम आतुपुरविनायकरे नमः। ओम महागणपतिये नमः। नानाविध परमपत्र पुष्पाणि समर्पयामि। धूपार्थं समर्पयामि। दीपार्थं समर्पयामि। अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम भूर्भुवस्सुः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। देवी सत्यं दौर्येण प्रचयामि अमृतत्वं स्वाहा। ओम प्राणाय स्वाहा। ओम अपानाय स्वाहा। ओम ज्ञानाय स्वाहा। ओम उदाराय स्वाहा। ओम समानाय स्वाहा। ओम ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। वरण्यं समर्पयामि। देवदेवानीं समर्पयामि। अमृतपुत्रं समर्पयामि। कर्पूरं समर्पयामि। गणानां अवामि कविं कवीनां ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पदे महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। कर्पूरं समर्पयामि। नीराजनं समर्पयामि। नीराजनानन्तरम् आसमनीयं समर्पयामि। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। वक्रतुंड महाकाय सूर्यकोटिसमप्रभ निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा। भगवती प्रसादं शिरसा प्रणमामि। ओम भो ओम भुव ओम स्वः ओम महं ओम जन ओम तव ओम सत्यम ओम तत्सर्ववर्ण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। उमावज्योतिर्समसं ब्रह्मस्वरूपं होमपात नमस्त दुर्द चैत्वारासि परमेश्वर प्रीत्यर्थम शुभे शोभने मूर्ते आद्य ब्रह्मण द्वितीय प्रार्थे श्रीवेदे वराह कल्पे वैवस्वत मन्वंतरे अष्टाविंशतितमे कलियुगे प्रथमे पादे जम्बूद्वीपे भारतवर्षे भरतखण्डे मेरो दक्षिणे पार्श्वे सखाप्ते अस्मिन् वर्तमाने व्यावहारिके प्रभवादिनां षष्ट्या संवत्सराणां मध्ये शुभकृतुनाम संवत्सरे उत्तरायणे वसंत ऋतु चित्तरे मासे कृष्णपक्षे प्रथमे तृतीयां सुभजितौ भानुवासरयुक्तायां स्वादिनक्षत्रयुक्तायां शुभनक्षत्र शुभयोग शुभकर्ण एवं गुण विशेषण विशिष्टायाम् अस्यां प्रथमे तृतीयां सुभजितो मम जन्मापाप जन्मप्रति हेचनपर्यन्तं मध्ये सम्भावितानं सर्वेषां भावनं सत्यां गुणात्तम् अस्माहं सहकुटुम्बानां क्षेम सद्धिर्य वीर्य विजय आयुरारोग्य ऐश्वर्याणाम् अभिवृद्ध्यर्थं समस्तमङ्गलाभ्यर्थं समस्त दुर्गोपशान्त्यार्थं रमणमहर्षिः प्रसादेन ज्ञानवैराग्यसिद्ध्यर्थं श्री रमणमहर्षिः पूजां करिष्ये तदंगं कलश पूजां स करिष्ये। विघ्नेश्वरं यथास्थानं प्रतिष्ठापयामि शोभनार्थे क्षेमाय पुनरागमनाय च सरहस्य मुखे विष्णुकण्ठे रुद्रसमाचरित मूले तत्र सिद्धितो ब्रह्मा मातृगुणे समृद्धा कुशं तु सागरा सर्वे सप्तत्वा सुन्दरा ऋग्वेदो यजुर्वेदो सामवेदो पदतरुण गंगे सर्वे गोदावरी सरस्वती नर्मदे सिन्धु कावेरी जलेस्मिन् सन्निधिं कुरु अंगै सहिता सर्वे कलशाम्बु समाचरिता आयान्तु देवपूजार्थं दुर्दशकारगा तंबूरा सागरोत्पन्नो विष्णु करे देवेश पूजिते नमोस्तुते देवो देवालय प्रोक्त जीव देव स्नान अंजार निर्मार्यम स्वयं भवने पूजयेत् ओम सकल गुणात्म शक्तियुक्ता योगपीठात्मे नमः आधार शक्तिये नमः मूल प्रकृतिये नमः आदिवराय नमः आदिगुरुमाय नमः आनंदाय नमः पृथ्व्यै नमः आदित्यादि नवग्रहदेवभ्यो नमः दशदिग्बालेभ्यो नमः गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरा गुरु साक्षात् परम ब्रह्मा तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। ओम अस्य श्री प्राणप्रतिष्ठा मुंडस्य ब्रह्मा विष्णु महेश्वरा ऋषिरिति सामधर्वाणि संनांसि सकल जगत सृष्टि सदि सम्मार्गाणि प्राणशक्ति परादेवता आम बीजम हरिम शक्ति ओम कीलकम प्राणप्रतिष्ठापने विनियोग आम अंगुष्ठाभ्यां नमः हरिंदर्जनिभ्यां नमः ओम मध्यमाभ्यां नमः आमनाभ्यां नमः हरिंगनिष्ठिकाभ्यां नमः ओम कर्दलपुष्टाभ्यां नमः आम हृदयाय नमः हरिं शीर्षे स्वाहा ओम शिगाय वसट आम कौसायम हरिं नेत्रदाय वसट ओम अस्त्रदाय पट पूर्वस्त्र दिग्बंध ध्यानम रक्तांबोधिष्ठ बोधोलिस तरणोधर कराप्ते वासं गोदंडम इक्षु चमणिगुण पंचबाणात् विप्राणसु कवालं त्रिनेसदापि नमस्कृत्या देवी बाला गौना बहुसुग्री प्राणशक्ति परान ओम आम हरिं क्रोम क्रोम हरिं माम अम यम लम लम हम सम सम हम सोम सोम हम स अस्यामूर्तौ जीवतिष्ठतो अस्यामूर्तौ सर्वेन्द्रियाणि वाङ्मनस्व सत्सोत्र दिव्या प्राणवाक् पाणिपाद वायुपुस्तानि याकस्ति स्वस्ति सुखं सुरं दृष्टन्तु स्वाहा। ओम अस्य श्री प्राणप्रतिष्ठामन्त्रस्य ब्रह्मा विष्णु महेश्वरा ऋषिरिति सामधर्वाणि संतांसि सकल जगत सृष्टि सदि सम्मार्गाणि प्राणशक्ति परादेवता आम बीजम हरिं शक्ति रोम कीलकम प्राणप्रतिष्ठापने विनियोग आम अंगुष्ठाभ्यां नमः हरिंगर्जनिभ्यां नमः रोम मध्यमाभ्यां नमः आम अनाभिकाभ्यां नमः हरिंगनिष्ठिकाभ्यां नमः रोम कर्दलपुष्टाभ्यां नमः आम हृदयाय नमः ओम शिरसे स्वाहा ओम शिगाय वसट आम कौसायम हरिं नेत्रदाय वसट रोम अस्त्रदाय पट पूर्वस्त्र दिग्बंध असुनिदे पुनस्माक्ष सक्ष पुनप्राणमे नो देवभोगम योपस्यमे सूर्यमुच्चरण मनमुदे मणियानशक्ति आवायुधो भव अद्धायुधो भव सन्निधो भव सन्निधो भव अमकुंडितो भव सुब्रतो भव सुब्रसन्नो भव सुमुगो भव वरदो भव प्रसिद्ध स्वामिन् सर्वजगन्नाथ यावत् पूजावसानकं तावत् ध्रुवं प्रतिभावेन बिम्बेस्मिन् सन्निधं गुरु। नमो भगवते श्री कुशेलाय नमो नमो भगवते श्री कुबेराय नमः नमो भगवते श्री कुशेलाय नमो नमो भगवते श्री कुबेराय नमः नमो भगवते श्री कुचेलाय नमो नमो भगवते श्री कुबेराय नमः चतुर्नोति मंदन पौली से परतर्पः लक्ष्मी तुलसी महाराज प्रिय ईश्वरा रमणोस्तोत्रम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः गुरु ब्रह्मा गुरु विष्णु गुरुदेवो महेश्वरा गुरु साक्षात् पर ब्रह्मा तस्मै जय गुरवे नमः अपार सच्चि सुगुवारि राशौर्य शौर्यमात्रं भुवनं समस्तं गुणायुधं तं रमणं कबीरं सिद्धाविनीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि। ओम महासेन ओम सेन जाताय नमः ओम श्री रमणाय नमः ओम गुरवे नमः ओम अगंड संविसागराय नमः ओम औजसे नमः ओम कारणोद्भवाय नमः ओम जगत्तिदावताराय नमः ओम श्री भूमिनाथास्तलोतिदाय नमः ओम पराशर कुलोतंसाय नमः ओम सुंदरातर्वफलाय नमः ओम कमनीय सुचारित्राय नमः ओम सयायाम्बासयावते नमः ओम शोणासुलमोदिरमानसाय नमः ओम स्वर्णस्तगाय नमः ओम श्रीमद्वादशान्तमास्तरे रक्तविद्योदयाय नमः ओम महाशक्तिनिवादेन प्रवृत्ताय नमः ओम परमार्थविदे नमः ओम दिव्यराय नमः ओम पितृपदान्वेषणे नमः ओम इंदुमौलिना पितृपदे नमः ओम पितृराजेष्टसोणशैलं प्राप्ताय नमः ओम तपोमयाय नमः ओम उदासीनाय नमः ओम महायोगिने नमः ओम महोत्साहाय नमः ओम कुशाग्रदये नमः ओम शांतसंकल्पसंभवाय नमः ओम सुसुंदरसे नमः ओम सवित्रे नमः ओम स्थिराय नमः ओम तपस्विदसर्वंगाय नमः ओम बुल्लाम्बोजविलोचनाय नमः ओम चंद्रिकासदासी मंडितानिलमण्डलाय नमः ओम सूतवाट्यां समासीनाय नमः ओम सूर्यदाक्षिणविप्रमाय नमः ओम वेदवेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञाय नमः ओम चिन्मुत्रिणे नमः ओम त्रिगुणाधिकाय नमः ओम विरूपाक्षगुहावासाय नमः ओम विराजसदाकृतिये नमः ओम उच्चित्तनयनाय नमः ओम पूर्णाय नमः ओम रसिदासतांडवाय नमः ओम गंभीराय नमः ओम परमाचार्याय नमः ओम सुप्रसन्याय नमः ओम अभयप्रदाय नमः ओम दक्षिणासीनिवाय नमः ओम धीराय नमः ओम दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः ओम स्वराजे नमः ओम महर्षिये नमः ओम भगवते नमः ओम ईट्याय नमः ओम भूमविद्याविशारदाय नमः ओम विमलाय नमः ओम दीर्घदर्शने नमः ओम आप्ताय नमः ओम रुजमार्गप्रदर्शकाय नमः ओम समत्रुसे नमः ओम सत्यत्रुसे नमः ओम सत्याय नमः ओम प्रसादाय नमः ओम अमितविक्रमाय नमः ओम सुकुमाराय नमः ओम सदानंदाय नमः ओम मृदुवासिने नमः ओम दयार्णवाय नमः ओम श्री सोणासुलयुरुद्भूतस्कन्धासननिकेतनाय नमः ओम सद्दर्शनोपदेष्टरे नमः ओम सद्भक्तवृंदपरिवृताय नमः ओम गणेशमुनिलिंगेन सेवितां कृष्णोरुवाय नमः ओम गीतोपदेशसारादिग्रन्थसंसिन्न संशयाय नमः ओम वर्णासनमुदादिताय नमः ओम रसज्ञाय नमः ओम सौम्याय नमः ओम आत्मवदे नमः ओम सर्वावधिमनस्तानां महारात्याय नमः ओम सर्वसद्गुणिने नमः ओम आत्मारामाय नमः ओम महाभागाय नमः ओम मातृमुक्तिविदायकाय नमः ओम विनदाय नमः ओम विनुदाय नमः ओम विप्राय नमः ओम मुनीन्द्राय नमः ओम भावगोज्वलाय नमः ओम दर्शनादकसम्मार्णे नमः ओम मौनेन स्वप्नबोधकाय नमः ओम ऋचादिकर्षानित्याय नमः ओम स्मरणात्मन्तमोचकाय नमः ओम अन्तस्फीरचण्डांशवे नमः ओम संसारान्मत्तारकाय नमः ओम सोणादिष्टरे नमः ओम अर्थविद्याप्रकाशकाय नमः ओम अविच्युतनिजप्रज्ञाय नमः ओम नैसर्गिकमहातपसे नमः ओम कमण्डलुधराय नमः ओम शुभ्रगविनवसनाय नमः ओम गुहाय नमः ओम दंडवाणीय नमः ओम कृपापूर्णाय नमः ओम पौरोकपिशक्वराय नमः ओम स्कंदाय नमः ओम देवतमाय नमः ओम अमर्त्याय नमः ओम सेनानिये नमः ओम पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री कार्तिकाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री मुरुगाय वल्ली दैवाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री सुब्रह्मण्याय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री स्वामीनाथाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। नमो भगवते श्री नटराजरे नमः। नमो भगवते श्री भैरवरे नमः। नमो भगवते श्री नंदीमहेश्वराय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री शिवपार्वतीये नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम शिवाय नमः। ओम शिवाय नमः। ओम शिवाय नमः। और रिसाइट बुधेश सारा कर्पूराज्ञया प्रापदे फलम कर्म गिंबरम कर्म दज्जडम प्रहति महददो पदन कारणम फलम शाश्वतम गद निरोधकम ईश्वरार्पितम नेचया कृतम सिद्धसोदकम मुक्तिसाधकम कायवाङ्मन कार्यमुद्यमं भूजनं जव चिन्तनं क्रमात् जगतैषधी युग्धसेवनम् अष्टमूर्तिभृत् देवपूजनम् उद्यमस्तवा दुज्जमन्दर सिद्धजं जव ध्यानमुद्यमम् आद्यधारया श्रोदशासमं सरलचिन्तनं विरलदभरं वेदभावना सौवमित्यसौ भावनाभिधा भावनीमदा भावशून्यस भावसुस्तुति भावनाबला भक्तिरुद्धमा इरुस्तले मन स्वस्थता क्रिया भक्ति योग भो दाच निश्चितम वायुरोदना दीयते मन जाल भक्षिव रोध साधनम सिद्धवायव सित्क्रियायुधा सागयोर्द्वयी शक्तिमूलगा लय विनाशने उभयरोदने लयकदम्बुनर् भवति नो मृदं प्राणबन्धना लीनमानसम् एकचिन्तना नासमेत्यद अष्टमानसो भ्रष्टयोगिन कृष्ट्यमस्ति स्वस्तिदं यद दृश्यवारिदं सिद्धमात्मन सित्वदर्शनं तत्वदर्शनं मानसं दुगिं मार्गणे हृदे नैव मानसं मार्गार्जवा वृद्धयस्त्वहं वृद्धिमाश्रिता वृद्धयो मनो विद्यहं मन तामयं कुतो भवति चिनवद ऐपदत्यहं निज विसारणम् अहमिनासवात् यमहं दया स्फुरधीरस्वयं परमपूर्णस इदमहं वदा अभिक्यमन्वहम् अहमिलीनके अभ्यल्लसत्तया विक्रयेन्द्रिय प्राणदीदम नामसेकस गज्जडं सस सत्ववासिका हित्ववेदरा श्रद्धयायिति सिद्धयायहं ईसजीवयोर् वेषदीभिदा सस्वभावदो वस्तु केवलं वेशानद स्वात्मदर्शनम् ईशदर्शनं स्वात्मरूपत आत्मसंस्थिति स्वात्मदर्शनम् आत्मनिद्वया आत्मनिष्ठदा ज्ञानवर्जिता अज्ञानहीनचित् ज्ञानमस्ति किं ज्ञातुमन्दरं किं स्वरूपमे आत्मदर्शने अव्यया भवा अपूर्णसित्सुखं बन्धमुक्त्यदी तंवरं सुखं विन्दधीयै Vivastu Daiviga Ahamavedagam Nijavivanagam Mahatitam Tabo Ramanavagiyam Mahatitam Tabo Ramanavagiyam Mahatitam Tabo Ramanavagiyam.
Namo Ramana, and a very warm welcome to all the devotees of Sunday Satsang. We will be commencing the study of verse 31 and 32. These two verses teach the amazing and loving relationship between the surrendered devotee and Ishvara. The committed sadhaka practicing self-inquiry embodies devotion of the highest order. Our speaker for these sessions will be Shri Raghavji. I would request Raghavji to now take over.
Namaste. We shall start with the invocatory mantras. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhi Tamastu Mamritushavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Ishvaro Gururātmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagini Vyomavadvyapta Devaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Vande Shri Ramanashehe Acharyasya Padabjam Yomi Darshayadisham Bhantam Dhantamaditya Parthasarati Rupena Shravayitva Shubhangiram Parthasyarti Haro Devaha Kripamurtissapatunah. So we were studying the 42 selected verses from the Gita of Sri Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi. We shall briefly review what we studied in the last session. We were looking at the shlokas 30 and also the previous one, 29. So if you recollect, these four shlokas from 27 to 30 have to do with the key practical method of Bhagavan of self-inquiry. And those shlokas 27 and 28 show such beautiful convergence and equivalence between what Sri Krishna taught in the Bhagavad Gita and what Sri Bhagavan taught in a way which we modern students of Advaita are able to very succinctly grasp and implement in our own life. Those shlokas were the shloka where we are asked to gradually draw in the mind and center it on the self. Shanai Shanair Parame Buddhya Dhritigrihitaya Atmasamstham Manakritva Nakinchidapi Chintaye. So gradually we allow the mind to settle down, giving it some time, and with a firm resolution, not easily giving up, even if the mind tries to play a little truant. We treat it like a child without getting frustrated or condemning our mind. Allow the mind to settle down. If you remember, one of the practical or let's say thumb rules given is that about 24 to 48 minutes is the kind of duration required for the mind to relatively become quieter, even if it were very unruly to start with. So even if, let's say, my mind happens to be a little restless on a particular day, inevitably within 48 minutes, it will at least acquire a level of depth. And I will at least feel comfortable and want to continue in that practice of meditation. It is for that reason a great boon of Indian culture that meditation is taught, at least traditionally, to youngsters at a very young age. And the impact is so much more. If they're taught to just sit for a while, let it be even with the practice of any pranayama or mantra, the mere poised fact of sitting still with the head, neck, and trunk erect itself generates a current of equipoise. And so here Krishna reiterates that point, saying, Shanai Shanai Varame Buddhya Dhritigrihitaya. So no matter what our lifestyle is, no matter what our personal situation is, we owe it to ourselves to find that 40 odd minutes of time for ourselves every day. It's a very necessary self-care, even as we sleep every day, which is essential. Even so, it is important to find that slot of one muhurta. One muhurta is a traditional unit of time of 48 minutes. Even when it comes to fixing the events such as an upanayanam or a marriage or any such elective function, ceremony, this 48-minute interval is regarded as a very specific unit of time within which lots of things remain steady or they change after 48 minutes. Which is why if you were to devote that 48-minute interval for yourself, rest assured you will find depth, you will find a ruchi, a taste in that meditation. And then Bhagavan goes on to say, Atma samstham manah kritva kinchidapi chintayet. So that is a crux, as I said, of the entire self-inquiry method of Bhagavan as well. To center the mind on the self. It doesn't mean you form a concept of the self. The self is like this, the self is formless. Not so much that, although that form of meditation too is helpful. Bhagavan calls meditating on the self using a very advanced word or a concept, such as I am formless, I am not the body, or I am Brahman, I am Shiva. So all such ideas and even words can definitely form the theme of meditation. It's very helpful, very powerful. Bhagavan in his Upadeshasaram has called that Abheda Bhavana. So to try and cultivate an attitude of Abheda, non-difference. And yet they are one step short of what is the core of the practice of Atma Vichara, or in the tradition it's called Nididhyasanam, which is to just allow the mind to dissolve in the face of seeing things as they are. So they just shift the attention away from the objects, and then the mind just stays as the self, because that is the very essential nature of the mind. Devoid of rajas, devoid of tamas, which is dullness and activity, devoid of these two, the inherent sattva, which is the guna of the nature of light and knowledge, of the nature of the mind will just remain as the self. In other words, you don't have to do anything with the mind. Just allow the mind to release itself from the hold of Rajas and Tamas. Rajas means activity, Tamas is dullness, and shift the attention back to the very I. To who is that inquirer? That itself generates a current of sattva, a continuity of sattva in the mind, and the mind abides, or it will just remain as the self. And for those of us, as I mentioned, who are not, let's say, able to be comfortable with this method of resting the mind in its own swarupa as Atma, we can for sure rely on mantra repetition or some pranayama for a while to allow the mind to settle down. But the core of this Atma Vichara or Vividhyasana as taught in this Bhagavad Gita is Atma Samstham Manaha, Atma, Atmani Samstham, Atma Samstham. So in the self, the mind relaxes. And surprisingly, or in a way, inevitably, given some time, the mind will necessarily settle down. We have to just be patient for a while. That's the idea here. And then Bhagavan goes on to say, so what do you do now if the mind moves away? Again, some thoughts come, and you again get carried away into some worry or some desire. Krishna Bhagavan says, gently draw in the mind. Yato yato nischardi manaschanchalamasstiram tatastato niyamyaitad atmanyeva vasham naye. So that's where a certain resolution, conviction is required that this practice I am doing is meaningful. I'm not just dryly, speculating on something and getting somewhere. This notion is helpful in a way. It's a positive reinforcement, which is healthy, it's fine. And above all, the Shraddha in the words of our Guru. Do not judge, even if you are seemingly not making progress according to your own yardsticks. Stay put, yato yato nischarati. As and when the mind moves away, gently bring it back and again relax in the self. Which means any thoughts which come, which you tend to get absorbed in, just let go of those thoughts. Just stop getting absorbed. You're not asked to think of any new concept. Instead, shifting the energy of your attention from building on these thoughts to just the source of these thoughts. Who is this I from which all these thoughts are, as it were, emerging like a flow? There's an I underlying every thought, isn't there? So we shift our attention to that I. I can give an analogy. Supposing there is light shining on an object. Only then you can see the object. In fact, when you see any object in front of you in your life, in your environment, the light is already there. The light is shining on that object. And so instead of seeing the object, without actually doing anything, I shift my attention to the light, illuminating that object. So I just become aware of the light. Analogously, this is just a drishtanta, an analogy. Even so, the I is there in every thought. It's not a separate entity apart from the thought. And so you just shift your attention. What is that I? The spirit of that shifting of attention is like that. You don't even need to verbalize what am I or who am I. You just revert or shift that focus away from the content of the thought to the thinker. Who or what is that I? And then the words of Bhagavan are already available in the background. The words of Vedanta are already studied. That I is the cause of all that exists. So that underlying understanding will anyway come out. You don't need to verbalize and get into more and more thoughts at that point. You don't need to say, oh, I am all that exists and so on. Once those ideas or those vicharas are already available because of study of Bhagavan or study from the Vedanta texts, merely staying with the I is the Yasana, because that I has already been glimpsed as being free from any limitations. Consciousness is the very essence of all that exists. All that exists is superimposed on consciousness. So this glimpse is already available because of studying the Upadesha of Bhagavan, studying the Shastra texts from our gurus. And so that understanding automatically comes up to the surface. So therefore, drawing in the mind, yato yato nischarati manaschanchalamasthiram, this mind which is prone to be restless and not firm, tatastato niyamyetad atmanyeva vashamye. In this way, what happens? Now the next shloka Bhagavan explains that yatendriya manobuddhihi manimoksha parayanaha vigaticha bhayakrodo yassada mukta eva saha. So this shloka we did it last time. And the last pada, there's a correction. You can make it yassada mukta eva saha. Yatendriya manobuddhihi manimoksha parayanaha. So that one who has the indriya and manas, yatendriya, manobuddhi, indriya, manas and buddhi. All these three are in control, in harmony. Control is not a great word. It implies a certain doing. It implies a certain forced suppression. So the word yataha implies they are self-regulated. They are on their own in a certain harmony. Otherwise, how long we keep, pulling back on the reins and controlling entities which want to get out of your control? It is stressful. Therefore, the idea of yatendriya manobuddhihi is not to kind of suppress or force a certain control. No doubt that may be useful up to a point. That is known as dhamma. When I try to force my mind or senses to just do something or not do something, that is dhamma. Dhamma is to control, to nigraha of the external organs. So I want, let's say, to just eat some, a cheap meal, eat some ice cream when I'm not supposed to. I just force that desire to go away temporarily. Again, it will sprout up after a while. So beyond a point, if I try to just suppress a desire, it's not going to go away for good. I got to keep fighting with the desire. Instead, I have other weapons in my arsenal. So I go deeper. What is behind that desire? I try to do vichara of that, at least to a certain extent. And I discover a deeper joy from other sources, such as maybe meditation, or in the case of, let's say, foodstuff, I discover an alternative to that. Or I discover that there is a deeper restlessness of mind which is making me crave for this object. That's the real truth of much of the neurosis in the modern world. That our minds try to distract us from our inner restlessness, the neurosis, meaning repetitive, draining thinking patterns. A person comes home from work a little stressed. Immediately he grabs a junk food meal because he wants to just eat and forget, some of the things that are going on in his mind. Just like, as they say in English, I want to get out of the mind. And unwittingly, unawarely, he just grabs whatever is available without being alert about it. So if you're able to address the direct cause of this, cravings, which is most of the time an inner vikshepa, inner restlessness, you will find these desires for any object or any situation become very weak. So it's like the very energy behind the mind, which is just drawing you out into things which perhaps are not really of interest. So you're able to diffuse that energy which is going out to grab the objects, be it a distraction in the form of maybe television, your mobile phone, or some food item, or it could be any other external pursuit which you label as not really conducive. It's entirely up to your prerogative. If you feel to this extent, I shouldn't be involved in this particular activity or this particular habit, that's the kind of thing we're looking at. No one can come and tell you, don't have this desire, don't do this. that approach is not really the core Vedantic approach. And Bhagavan was so beautifully embodying that. He never was prescriptive. Don't do this, you should do this. Never like that. That's the love and the beauty of the Guru. He knows that if that student or disciple goes deeper and addresses the vikshepa, the restlessness at the level of the mind, automatically the manaha, buddhi, indriyas come under harmony, become regulated. So this deeper resolution of restlessness and the cravings is what is intended here. Yatendriya manobuddhihi munir moksha parayanaha. Munihi, as I said, is mananashilaha. So normally the munihi word is also used for the one who maintains maunaha. Maunaha also means mananashilaha, not just silence here. So this word silence is often misunderstood. Like I mentioned once, the silence of a stalwart, a great avatara, our Guru like Bhagavan, is entirely different from the mere silence of someone who just temporarily, let's say, chooses to not speak. And perhaps even his mind is relatively very quiet. It's not just that here. The silence of Bhagavan was backed up by a certain great fount of Shakti. It's not ordinary. And if at all we can say it is silence with a capital S, not mere absence of words there. And that silence could immediately, or okay, if not immediate, at least within a short while, for those who were open to Bhagavan's grace, imbue them with the deeper silence, deeper abidance as the self. So those who came to Bhagavan, as many of us know, find their mind quietening down. All their questions become not so important. They drop away. Many such instances are there. Because Bhagavan was able to, in some sense, communicate, transmit, teach at a subtler level that deeper silence, which is the very nature of Atma. So Bhagavan's silence is something unprecedented. Like the silence of perhaps Dakshinamurti. Even there we can say he taught with the mudra. He taught perhaps even through some granthas. So we cannot 100% insist that maunaha or silence is necessarily the total absence of words. So, like I said, Bhagavan had that special power by which he could completely refashion the samskaras and mind of those in front of him. So much so, some of the disciples would even get frightened. Oh my God, I am losing this sense of ego. There is the example of, if I remember, it was Duncan Reyes, or no, one other French minister from Puducherry. So some of you may have heard or read this. So this secretary to the French, governor of Pondicherry once came to Bhagavan, and he had a long list of questions framed in very classical French, very prolix, very difficult to understand. And then Sri Balarama Reddy knew French. And so he was asked to read and translate what this secretary to the French governor of Pondicherry had written. And he was struggling to go word by word and translate it sincerely, Sri Balarama Reddy. And Bhagavan says, just give me the general gist of what he's saying. See, Bhagavan is very, omniscient in that sense. He could very quickly see what is the mind of the disciple. Anyway, the question came, so he wanted to get a general idea of what is in the mind of the questioner. So he asked Balaram Reddy to give the general gist of what is written in French. And Sri Balaram Reddy says that he is looking for some concrete insight or an experience, if you like, of what is understood as the self, as non-duality, and not just some words, because he has already had enough of words and so on, or some assurance about something happening in future and so on. So he wanted something concrete which he could, in some sense, own up and or use the word experience, if you like. And so Bhagavan, after in response to this translation of Sri Balarama Reddy, Bhagavan looks at that Frenchman for a while with his eyes, with all the power, all the grace, in silence. And within a short while, the minister, or the secretary is unable to handle that presumable transmission of, the grace of Bhagavan. Says, no, Bhagavan, not now, no more, not now, I'm not ready. To that effect, he says, I'm not ready for that, giving up that, agenda of the ahankara, the ego, with its story of what I am and so on. So Bhagavan had that capacity to put people in that, state of pure nididhyasanam and take them to some unprecedented depth. So that is an extremely special case of silence. And whereas in other contexts, the word silence, or in this case rather, the word munihi, implies one who dwells upon mananashilaha, says Shankara. So unlike such an unprecedented case, we should understand that the word munihi or maunihi can mean either silence in such rare cases like Bhagavan, but also a lot of shraddha and then contemplation upon what is being taught by the Guru. So this munihi, what happens to him? Yatendriya mano buddhihi munir moksha parayanaha, who is keen on attaining that freedom from all limitations, freedom from dukkha. Vigatecha bhayakrodaha, yes sada mukta eva saha. That one is as good as free. So this munihi is not yet, a jnani. So this shloka is not dealing with a jnani. He is dealing with someone who is on the way, on the journey to jnana, arriving at jnana. And that person, that munihi, has to some extent been able to externalize all these desires, ichcha, bhaya, krodha. So if you remember in the last discussion, the method given was to externalize what is external to you. So this is like the step preceding self-inquiry problem. So a practical tip or a practical, footnote here would be that it's not perhaps most optimal to just suddenly come and say, okay, I sit down, meditate and start practicing Atma Vichara. Instead, take a few moments to allow the mind to leave everything external. So you do this by just having an eye on what the mind is having its content, and recognize that you are dwelling on things that are external to you. You are not really, involved in making them what they are. That's because during meditation, you're not really trying to work on those things. Let's say I have an issue with somebody or with some work. So during meditation, I'm not anyway trying to do something about that. So might as well keep it external, might as well attend to what I am doing right now. This simple logic is given a certain power by saying, as Krishna Bhagavan says in the 5th chapter elsewhere, Sparshan Kritva Bahirbhahyam. So we look at the content of the mind, not so much in detail, but the broad theme the mind is getting distracted by, and externalize it. Sparshan Kritva Bahirbhahyam, keeping external things external. So you spare a moment and recognize that, hey, look, these things that are floating around in my mind are really external to me. I will attend to them in an objective way, doing what I can, but I recognize I didn't make them what they are. The laws of Ishvara, working through various factors, including even perhaps my body and mind, have created them, but they remain external. The key word here is you externalize your nearest and dearest who are evoking these problems and stresses in you during meditation. Afterwards, of course, you're objective and you have all the love and care. That doesn't go away. Externalizing doesn't mean you don't care. Instead, you're becoming more objective. You're seeing things as they are. That is the meaning of keeping things external, keeping external things external. And like I said, in contrast, we are actually carrying within a lot of things that are external. So like I said, a daughter-in-law might be carrying the mother-in-law inside and vice versa. or an employee will be carrying the load of his company, his boss and his subordinates inside his mind. So it can be mother, father, all of these are carried inside. And with that person carrying all these things inside, Atma Vichara doesn't acquire the necessary depth. Not immediately, until these are externalized. Therefore, we consciously externalize these external things. All we do is look at what content is there in the mind and recognize there is a universal intelligence which makes them what they are. I leave them external to me. Say as much if necessary, in words if necessary, but the bhava, the attitude is, okay, I leave them external. Inside I play these roles, but I am not fixed to that role. I play so many roles. With respect to my company, okay, I'm an employee. With respect to the wife, I'm a husband. With respect to the brother, I'm a brother. But all these roles, I, right now during meditation, keep them external. I am simply a conscious being, closing my eyes and sitting here, right here. That's the spirit we summon up. Setting aside these roles, that's what happens when you externalize all these objects. So that's a very helpful and a powerful step by which technically we can say you come and arrive at the pure witness, the Shuddha Sakshi. And from there, Atma Vichara is a breeze. It's very natural. So externalizing these things, Yatendriya Mano Buddhi Mano Moksha Parayanaha, Vigatecha Bhaya Krodha. Vigata means one who is free from devoid of Ichha, Bhaya and Krodha. Ichha is strong binding desires. Bhaya is the fear of non-fulfillment of desire. You know, the fact that certain of my desires may not be fulfilled creates some stress, some fear. Oh my, am I going to be left like this? But the truth is, you are free and can discover a certain space and joy in spite of things being what they are. That's the solution which our gurus are telling us. If all our happiness was contingent on one specific desire being fulfilled, there is no hope ever. So we are lost forever. Instead, the gurus and our acharyas are telling us that you can have these desires where they are in the place. They just came up, you didn't create them very often. You can still keep the desire and its object external as well. You recognize, okay, there's a desire. I allow the desire to be in its place, but right now I am coming back to the self. That self which is a priori. Before even the desire is there, I am there. I highlight that fact. It's a fact. Before even the desire arises, I am there. You can use various ideas and experiences to understand that any desire is ultimately added on to me. It's not inherent in me. The first thing that you wake up with, that small instantaneous window, when you just wake up, mind has not yet fully sprouted and grabbed all its regular accounts in the world. That's one helpful way of looking and appreciating the fact that I am, and only then I desire. Then again, your past experiences of meditation, you can evoke that. Because when you, let us assume, had a past experience where you were very quiet, mind was very relaxed, free or relatively temporarily from any desires and stresses, recollect that. That's also a helpful way. So all of these is like preparatory, okay? Very helpful, useful preparation to go deeper. So when you recollect your past experience of quietness and recognize that, hey, I was quiet without any desires being fulfilled. All the desires were there and my situation was just the same, and yet I was able to find some peace and quiet and freedom. That's what I am trying to arrive at as the meditator. So this Vigatecha Bhayakrodaha Yassada Mukta. So one who's able to thus keep all these desires and their consequences. Bhaya is fear of non-fulfillment of desire. Krodha is when for sure the desire is not going to get fulfilled, then a person gets angry. Much of human anger is usually because of frustrated desire. And then someone or the other is made the scapegoat for that non-fulfillment of desire. That's the sad story of humankind. That on the other hand, the person can go within. It's not easy, it's very subtle, but it also is not like rocket science. What is taught here is just a simple, straightforward way of being objective. That let the desires and their objects just be kept out during meditation for that duration. And you will find that there is a space, a freedom, a relaxation inside. So that person is as good as free. Yes, sada mukta eva saha, says Krishna. Then going on to the next shloka, we have from here the next two shlokas, the one who is accomplished. Until now we were dealing with the method, self-inquiry, and the one who has made a lot of, let's say, progress in the form of, actualizing and owning up the truth. But until this shloka number 30, he's still like an advanced sadhaka, I feel. But now these two shlokas deal with the one who has completed that journey towards self-discovery, who is no more a sadhaka, instead he is a jnani. And why are these shlokas there? Because after all, I am somewhere lost in my life, and what is the use of knowing about how a jnani sees or looks at things, or how he and his jnana is? Well, the answer is that what the jnani does or sees, or whatever attitude he has, is a sadhana for us. What is natural, spontaneous for the jnani is one which we can, with great benefit, consciously foster in ourselves. Consciously we can cultivate it. That is the spirit in which the jnani is described. That is the spirit in which a jnani's lakshanas, his qualities, are taught and described in various shlokas. So this next shloka, the 31st in the list of 42, we will chant today. Yes, 30. 30 is one shloka, is also a continuation of the 29th one. We will complete that. We just saw that briefly and just complete that. Then the next 31 and 32 give the jnani lakshanas. But just before the jnani lakshana, almost completion of jnana is what is represented in this 30th final shloka of the method. After that, 31 and 32 are the siddha, the jnani himself is described. So 30th shloka we just completed. Sarva bhutasthamatmanam sarva bhutani chatmani ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshanaha. Sarva bhutasthamatmanam sarva bhutani chatmani ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshanaha. So this is what I just briefly mentioned in the previous class, and we will just look at a little more of that and then go on to the next two shlokas. Sarva bhutastham atmanam. That advanced sadhaka of jnana, in his regular life, when he is not actually in meditation, what does he experience or see, or how is his attitude fashioned? And Bhagavan says here, he sees the self in all living beings. Extremely tricky. He sees the self in all living beings. Sarva bhutastham atmanam pashyati. So he sees the Atma, the self, in all living beings. Well, it's very, sounding nice. At the same time, is it really feasible? Can I see that self, which is pure, of the nature of consciousness, and which is of the nature of Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, all these, lakshanas are there. Can I really appreciate that in, let us say, a person who is adharmic, who is given to unethical behavior, who is given to doing things which are highly harmful to other living beings? Can you see the self in them all? If Arjuna is asked to see the self in Duryodhana, what does that mean? So he should see the self and then salute, then he cannot fight the war. Well, the idea here is that when I see the other person or the people in front of me for what they are, without dvesha, without an emotional reaction and response to them, then I'm objective with respect to them. The best analogy for this is how you or I would look at, let us say, a lion or a tiger. So these animals are krura mriga, they are carnivorous and animals which are going to harm human beings if they're around them and if they're hungry. And yet, when we think of tigers and lions, we think they should be protected, their environment should be preserved, we shouldn't destroy them. There's no dvesha for them, there's no hatred for them. Isn't that very interesting and mysterious? That's because we draw the line, we do not get close to them. We protect ourselves, keep them where they are. In other words, we are not trying to say that we are going to go and associate with lions or tigers, and if we are in their vicinity, we will take defensive action. But there is no dvesha, there is no hatred, there is no deep visceral response coming of emotion. Instead, we recognize in Ishvara's creation, there are these entities which are violent, and I maintain my distance, if not physically, at least emotionally. When it comes to people, that is the attitude I have. I see that they are what they are. If there's a violent or physically, let's say, violent person, or better still, who is given to abusive behavior, let's say there's no physical violence. If there's physical violence, you report it or you stay away from there. But let's say there is a certain degree of mental harassment coming from somebody. Well, the first thing I recognize is that there is a complex psychological order working there. And instead of draining my energy having dvesha for them, which is counterproductive for me, I recognize, okay, there is a certain intelligence which is making them the way they are. It is, of course, not fully clear. It's okay. But still, Ishvara, the cosmic intelligence, has made them what they are. And due to the law of karma, I am in a certain situation. So I do what I have to do. But internally, I am like steel. I am very strong. I refuse to get emotionally entangled by getting into any kind of hatred, any kind of resentment. Why are they the way they are? The question is okay as a logical question, but this is an emotion. Why are they the way they are? Why are they the way they are? This is constantly eating me from within. I refuse to drain my energy with that. I refuse to allow my emotions to just get hijacked, thinking about and worrying about what I cannot change. I learn to recognize that what cannot be changed is external to me, and I only have to do my minimum role there. It's very challenging, and yet it is possible. When I learn to do just my role there without resentment about the way the situation is, which I cannot change. So that is the key here. Sarva bhutastam atmanam. I recognize the same self is playing this drama in different ways. And I do what I have to do. Arjuna has to fight Duryodhana. And yet Krishna doesn't ask him to have hatred for Duryodhana. He says that the cosmic order has created this war for you, this dharma yuddha. Play your role and you'll be free from samsara. Krishna never asks Arjuna to have hatred. He just says, fight Duryodhana. But all the teaching of Gita is to say, dvesha is not necessary. So that's the subtle beauty of the Bhagavad Gita. That one can see the self in the other person, even while maintaining that I do my role and I have no dvesha. That is a subtle thing. So to sum up, what does that mean? Sarva bhutastam. I recognize all people are also in some sense like Ishvara's animal kingdom. There are some very sadhu mrigas. There are some very gentle animals like maybe cows. And there are some violent carnivorous mrigas, animals like tigers and lions. But I don't have any dvesha. I interact with them differently. I might get closer to herbivores and I might stay away from carnivores, or at least I take some protective action, defense. That's fine, but no dvesha. That is the essence of the sarva bhutastam atman. Then again, the next word, sarva bhutani chatmani. So this entire creation is resolved as being in the self. All time, all space, whatever you see is just pure awareness. I come back to seeing that this multiplicity is actually a show. It's like a superimposition, like in a dream. You see a 3D experience in a dream, and yet the entire dream universe was in me. Analogously, this entire waking state too is understood by that jnani. So we are not anymore looking at the person who's struggling with his sadhana, but the one who has mastered jnana. And he says that jnani will say, or will have that continuous, spontaneous knowledge. All beings are in me. I am all that exists. All beings are in me, even as in a dream. Swapnavat. Swapnavat, everything is in me. Like in a dream, this whole universe is on the canvas of consciousness, which is aham, which is I. And then ikshate yoga yuktama sarvatra samadarshana. So ikshate, he sees yoga yuktama. That is the power of this yoga, this jnana yoga. Is always joined with that jnana. Yoga here, the word means with that knowledge. It's not a thought which comes and goes anymore. Instead, it is there always, sahaja. It is there always. One good thing here is Bhagavan says that even if one doesn't have the sahaja sthiti of jnana, or immediately, still the practice of Atma Vichara will give a current of, Atma Jnana, the vritti will be there in the background for a length of time. So he would encourage the disciples who were in their roles in life, grihasthas and people who are working, even if you take off an hour or two in a day, devote yourself diligently to Atma Vichara, the current will be maintained for a length of time. He used to assure his devotees. So even so here to Yoga Yukta Atma, they are joined with this yoga of knowledge. Sarvatra Samadarshana. Everywhere they see the same self without trying to seek or grab on to anything. I am reminded of a story how there were people who came to take Bhagavan on a yatra to many places so that Bhagavan could preach or teach in so many words, give speeches and talks and so on. And Bhagavan says he had no interest in any of that. He merely ignores them entirely and they go away. They go away, leaving him. Because for the jnani, all he sees is the Atma. He doesn't see ajnanis. He doesn't see so much of multiplicity as having some reality sense. So Bhagavan would say in another context, wherever I go, I see the same self. So for you, he didn't say that, but says if there is variety, then I can go to some places. Okay, I see something different there. The jnani sees that same self. Maybe a little mask is different, but that's not substantive. The same self is seen, which is why that jnani is devoid of any curiosity to get different experiences. In contrast, what is the regular jiva? He is the experience mongerer. He is always desiring newer and newer experiences, newer combinations of, clothes and food and different sights and sounds. You always want variety. A person comes to the Himalayas and then he experiences some nice mountains. After a while, he wants to see some other mountains. He has got bored with those mountains. He's done a trek nearby, let's say. Okay, that trek has been seen. Now he wants to trek somewhere deeper, somewhere farther away. He's gone to Gangotri. After that, he now wants to go to Tapovan. It's upper, beyond Gangotri in the Himalayas. After Tapovan, then you want to go to Kadapta or go to the Kalindi Khal Pass. There's a pass which connects Gangotri to Badrinath. Very wonderful, amazing journey. So the mind goes on wanting this variety, even in sacred places. But the one who sees the self, he is naturally devoid of that curiosity. He's so full and content. There's no curiosity to get more and more sights and sounds and experiences. That is the beauty of the jnani, who is described here. Sarvatra Samadarshana. Sama means not equal. Sama means Brahman. Whenever the word samam is used in the Bhagavad Gita and many other contexts, it's not just equal or same or something. Although grammatically the word samam is same, the word English word same due to the Indo-European connection is come from Sanskrit, sama, no doubt. But in the context of the Gita, samam is Brahman, means same consciousness, which is nirvishesha, devoid of any differences. So samam is nirvishesham Brahma, says Shankara in so many places. So he's able to see that same Atma Tattva, fullness. How does he experience it? The closest we can say to describing what the Jnani appreciates is through this shloka, saying that that same fullness is experienced at every instant. So where is the desire to change it? You can change if you feel some smallness or some repetition. But that self is ever new. The beauty of one who sees the self, even if one who has a glimpse of the self, it is appreciated as ever new, ever fresh, ever full. There's never a question of boredom with the self. One can feel bored with anything other than the self, but if a person has a glimpse of that self, it's always full of freshness, newness. These words are relevant. Pura api navam. It is always there. At the same time, it is navam. Navam means new, fresh, full of life. So that is why the word purana is used to describe the self. Ever old, older than the oldest, but it's newer than the newest, the latest fashion, as it were. So that self keeps that person always at rest in contentment. That is the Samadarshana. So this is the shloka here. The other two we'll just chant them and then we will see them in the next class. Ananyas chintayanto mam ye janah paryupasate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yogakshemam vahamyaham tesham jnani nityayuktah ekabhaktirvishishyate priyo hi jnanamatyartham aham sachamam priyaha. So these two shlokas deal with something very beautiful about how Ishvara and Jnani are in some sense the same, and yet at a vyavaharic level outwardly they are bound by a bond of total love and total oneness. So this relation, if at all we can use the word relation, at the vyavaharic level, at a visible level, between the Jnani and Ishvara, the cosmic intelligence, is brought out nicely in these two shlokas. It reveals how even a Jnani is full of love. It's not a dry, oneness. Advaita is sometimes wrongly accused or thought to be something dry. Instead, the Jnani is full of love and full of the positive emotion, oneness with Ishvara and oneness with those who are manifesting the Ishvaratvam, that is all the devotees. So these two shlokas explain and unfold that relation between the Jnani and Ishvara. We will look at it in the next class. We will end with the Shanti Mantra. Any questions, if any, you can see. You can let me know. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Anuragji, you can take over.
Raghavji, thank you so much for a wonderful session. I do not have any questions coming from the devotees on the YouTube channel. In case any devotee here on Zoom may have any questions, please feel free to ask Raghavji right now, or we shall proceed towards Akshar Manamalai and Aarti. It seems not. Raghavji, thank you so much once again for a wonderful session. We shall meet you again next Sunday at the same time, sir. Narayanji, I would now request you to please initiate Akshar Manamalai and Aarti. I believe there is some technical connection issue at the Kendra. We will have to be on hold. There is some internet connectivity issue at the Kendra with the Wi-Fi not functioning. We will try to connect through the mobile data. Taranajik, can you initiate Akshar Madamalai and Aarti, please?
करुणाकर गणपतिये परमवरुणिका पाये अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचला अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचला அருணாச்சலமென அகமே நினைப்பவர் அகந்தை வேறறுப்பார் அருணாச்சலா அழகு சுந்தரம் போல் அகமும் நீயுமுற்று அபிநமாயிருப்போம் அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचला அகமுகுந்தீர்த்து அகருக சிறையாய் அமர்வித்ததென்கொல் அருணாச்சலா ஆருக்காயனை ஆண்டனை அகற்றி அகிலம் பழித்திடும் அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचला अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल இப்படித்த புனையே நினைக்கித்த இனியார் விடுவார் அருணாச்சலா अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल உனையே மாற்றி ஓடாகுணத்திலே உறுதியாயிருப்பார் அருணாச்சலா ஊர் சுற்றி உளம்பிடா உன்னை கண்டு வணங்கிட நடையை காட்டருணாச்சலா Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala. என்னை அடித்து போது என்னை களவாவிடு இதுவோ ஆண்மை அருணாச்சலா. ஏன் இந்த உறக்கம் என்னை பிறழ்க்க இது உன கழகோ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. ஐம்புல கல்வர் அகத்தினில் புகும்போர் அகத்தினிலையோ அருணாச்சலா. ஒரு மனம் மொழி தேவர் வருவார் சூரே இது அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. ஓங்கார பொருள் உயர்வில் முனையார் அறிவார் அருணாச்சலா. அவுமை புனனும் அருளை தந்து ஆழ்வது உங்கர அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சலம் வாழி அன்பர்களும் வாழி அக்ஷரமணமாலை வாழி. வாழ்க சூரியம் பிரகாசம் வாழ்க வாழ்கவே. சூழ்க சுற்றாத்ம சக்தி சூழ்க சூழ்கவே. வாழ்க சுயம் பிரகாசம் வாழ்க வாழ்கவே. சூழ்க சுற்றாத்ம சக்தி சூழ்க சூழ்கவே. ஏழு நன்க ஜீவன் முக்தி இன்பம் பொங்கவே. ஏழு நன்க ஜீவன் முக்தி இன்பம் பொங்கவே. இதயமாகும் இறைவனாகி எல்லாம் பொங்கவே. இதயமாகும் இறைவனாகி எல்லாம் பொங்கவே. பால் மனம் மகன் வாழ்வு பாட்டு தொழிலவே. பால் மனம் மகன் வாழ்வு பாட்டு தொழிலவே. பரம சச்சிதானந்தா பாட்டு தொழிலவே. பரம சச்சிதானந்தா வாழ்க சுயம் பிரகாசம் வாழ்க வாழ்கவே. சூழ்க சுத்தாத்ம சக்தி சூழ்க சூழ்கவே. தட்டிலாத நித்திய ஜீவம் தத்வமோகவே. தட்டிலாத நித்திய ஜீவம் தத்வமோகவே. தன்மயத்து சின்மயந்தழைத்து போகவே. தன்மயத்து சின்மயந்தழைத்து போகவே. எட்டு திக்கும் அம்ச சோகம் எதிரொலிக்கவே. எட்டு திக்கும் அம்ச சோகம் எதிரொலிக்கவே. எல்லாம் பிரம்மம் என்னும் உண்மையை நிறுத்திக்கவே. எல்லாம் பிரம்மம் என்னும் உண்மையை நிறுத்திக்கவே. வாழ்க சுயம் பிரகாசம் வாழ்க வாழ்கவே. சூழ்க சுத்தாத்ம சக்தி சூழ்க சூழ்கவே. அம்சசோகம் அல்லேனா அம்சசோகம். नीराजन समर्पयामि नीराजन समर्पयामि उद्येव समाहितं नागोनि तलिका कर्पूर सोदा सन्निहितं कर्पूर नीराजन समर्पयामि
Namo Ramana. This brings us to the closure of today's satsang. On behalf of the Kendra, I apologize for the very poor internet connectivity. We shall reconvene next Sunday. Namo Ramana.